Hello YouTube, I'm Ishiro, and today I'll be presenting you a deck guide on Macross Delta, the Link deck. So this is not a classic deck profile, where I'll just go through each card of the deck and tell you what they do. I'm going to tell you what you want to do with the deck, and what is your game plan at every level. So Macross Delta is quite a unique deck, thanks to the Flying Goddess event. So it's a 1-1 event, when you play it you can put it in memory, and if you have two of them in memory, all of your climaxes share the name of climaxes that are in your waiting room. So they need to have the link tag, so we can only play 6 different climaxes. We play 2 of Ikenai Borderline and 2 of Aksha. But this is still quite unique. Normally you would only play 2 of every climaxes in your deck. So this allows us to play multiple combo climaxes at the same time, and we also don't need to play any more climax swapper. And the second unique thing about the deck is the Reina Brainstorm. So it can be a classic pay 1, tap 1, flip 4 and salvage for your climaxes. But you can also pay 1, tap, you mill all cards of your deck until you have 5 left. If you have 3 or less different climaxes, she goes to clock, but if you have 4 or more different names, at the start of your anchor phase, you can refresh. So basically you have an easy way to put all your different climaxes in waiting room to have the name access for Flying Goddess, and you also can never take the refresh damage, which is a huge thing. So let's see what is the game plan step by step. So at level 0, your objective is to gather these 5 things in your hand. 2 Flying Goddess, a Kaname for the combo on level 1, 1 Climax, preferably a 1k1, and if possible the Reina Brainstorm. For this the main thing you're going to use is this Freya and Mikumo. When you play it, if you have another music character, you can top check 3 and check if there's an event, you can take it in your hand and discard 1. Or you can directly discard 1, salvage the Flying Goddess. This is a very reliable way to get to the event. On top of that, when you play her from hand, you can pay 1, discard 1, check 3 and take a card in your hand. So you can either take the climax if you're still missing it, or the event. Next would be this Chiri profile. When she goes to waiting, you top check 4, you take a level 1 or plus, and you discard 1. So she can take the event or the Kaname, but be careful. This deck usually runs around 20 level 0s, so it's not that rare to miss and just discard 1 for nothing. To get a climax, you have this Kome-like profile. During your turn she gains plus 1000, and when she goes to the waiting room, you top check 3, and you can add 1 climax to your hand, then discard 1. So preferably you want to play her, reverse a level 0, and when she dies, and you can get a climax like this. To get the Kaname, you have this tricky profile. Pay 1 clock 1 from waiting room, search for level 1 or less. And you have the Rico profile, discard 1 top check, you salvage from the level you revealed. So most often you're just going to salvage these level 0s. So because you need 2 stocks to play the Flying Goddess, you actually want to make at least 2 attacks during level 0. We don't have any kind of clean cuts. Macross Delta doesn't really have a reliable +1 on level 0 that doesn't cost stock, but you are likely to have to make a triple attack anyway, and kinda hope that your opponent lets you have the on-death effect, hoping that they don't have a stock trap or things like this. So that's it for level 0. So entering level 1, you still grab one of these cards if you're still missing one. Then you pay 2 stocks to play 2 Flying Goddess and put them in memory. So now you have this effect. When you play a climax, it has the same name as the copies you have in waiting room. You also want to make sure you have 1 level 1 Kaname, this 2-0 Mikumo, the Ikenai Borderline climax, and the Aksha climax in your waiting room. If you are missing one of them, you can use the Reina Brainstorm, pay 1. So just leave 5 cards in the deck and mill the rest. Double check if you actually have 4 different names, so else the Brainstorm has to go into clock. Here we have them. And so now you can play Kaname, any climax, attack with the Kaname. So when she attacks, you summon a cost 0 into the front row on an empty slot. You deal your attack. Then Kaname summons the Mikumo, and the Mikumo, at the start of anchor phase, if the slot in front of her is reversed or empty, you can sack the climax Ikenai Borderline, so any climax in our case, and salvage 2. The refresh from the Reina Brainstorm, it does the same timing as Mikumo, So you can always choose to go first sack the climax, salvage, and then do your refresh. I don't think there's any practical case where you want to do it the other way, so you can pretty much guarantee that you refresh with 8 climaxes this way. Unless you trigger climaxes that were stuck in the bottom 5. So in this setup, your powers will always be 8000, 8000, 9005. And make sure to always play around the potential counter from the opponent. If you don't know their counter, how much power they can have, if they can actually cross 9k5, probably attack the safest lost, like level 0 for instance. Because it will feel very bad if you don't get the salvage 2 from Mikomo. So what do you want to salvage exactly with the Mikomo? Number 1 would be another Kaname to reduce the combo on the next turn. Normally your opponent is going to reverse them, so they're going to already be in waiting room. So you'll just have to reborn and reborn. Number 2 would be one of these Brainstorm, if you don't already have them. The second one, the Freya one, is not in all builds. It's a top check free, so it's one way you can get your climaxes, but it's not really super reliable. Then you want the Bonder for the pay 1, discard 1, top check free, take a card, to make sure that you can get another climax. Ideally, you want to not clock and always get your climaxes from effect. Because if the game goes on for 2 or 3 turns, you don't really run any early play heal in this deck, so it really adds up with time. Also, when you have 2 Flaming Goddess in memory, the Flying Goddess becomes 0 cost, and you can choose to draw 1 with it. So it can be one more way, you can just discard 1, salvage the event, and try for 1 more draw, to draw for climaxes. Next one is going to be the Kome-like, so you can always play it, sack the Kaname, and top check free for a climax this way. Then you want to take the Reina assist, we're going to come back on this on level 2. And finally, if your hand is really full, you can either take the Rico for flexibility, or a Freya finisher. So on level 2, you want to basically repeat the combo. So most of the time your turn is going to start with pay 1, discard 1, and check free, try to find a climax. If you didn't, you bond for the event and try for 1 more draw. But now the cool thing you can do is play the level assist Reina. She lets you rest there to send the characters to stock. So now you can just get rid of your utilitaries instead of sacking them to play Kaname. It lets you build quite a good compression if you happen to cancel after the refresh on Freya. And the other thing is that if your opponent is playing 3 level 3 early play that your Mikomo cannot pass, you can play this 2-1 Mikomo. She's discard 1, salvage 1, so cool and fix. And you can sack her to bounce an opponent character, so you can make 1 free slots for the Mikomo to direct attack and get her combo off. If you happen to get lucky and already have what you need in waiting room, including the 2 climaxes, and you still have a decent compression, you can consider to not do the second effect of the Reina Brainstorm. Else, I really advise it to use it as much as possible. It's just 1 stock investment to stop taking refresh damage, to potentially stop taking damage at all. So be really careful if you decide to not go for it. Also, if you think that you are close to leveling up at the next turn, then with the Mikomo combo, you can start taking the Freya combo. And now for level 3. So, level 3 you can really play the finisher of your choice, but the most common one in the Link deck is the Freya. It's a Mocha free, so top check free, you remove the cards that you want, so the climax of your opponent, you put the rest back on the top. And she has the same climax as the 2-0 Mikomo, so it lets you play 2 copies of it and not have consistency problems. Because if you are running a different finisher, sometimes the climax is just not in waiting room. And having 2 copies of it really helps decreasing the chances that some catastrophic scenario happens. So case number 1, your opponent has a normal compression. Just go for triple Mocha. Case number 2, your opponent has a big waiting room with a few climaxes. Let's say like 2 climaxes in waiting and 10 other cards. And they still have like 15 cards in the deck. Then the recommended line is to go for this Freya and Ayate. If you have the Olave Climax, you get to choose between 3 effects. So, heal 1 and draw 1, or burn 2, or basically Fumio, so choose 2 climaxes in your opponent's waiting room and shuffle the rest into their deck. So putting back a lot of free damage. And she also gains 5,000 for reasons. So Macross Delta doesn't have access to any stock swap, but this is still useful. And case number 3, you only need to deal 2 damage to your opponents, so they're either at 3-5 or at 3-4 and close to refresh. What you can do is side a level 3 with Freya, pay 1, discard 1, check 3. You make sure there's only 2 free damage on top of your deck, and then on attack, you can do the burn 2. There are no counterplays to that, since you are first siding. The opponent cannot play a Wrath counter or a Free Flash counter, etc. Also note, if you are in such a case where you want to side, this Freya Brainstorm lets you top check at the beginning of climax phase, so you can know what's the trigger on your first attack. So we went through the deck's overall game plan. I quickly want to talk about something, it's the standby trigger that you have. So this deck has 5 choice trigger, 2 salvage trigger and 1 standby trigger, and it can lead to some funny scenarios. Firstly, you want to not play this one from hand on level 1 or level 2. You want to be playing the Soul Climaxes to rush your opponent. If you play it as your climax to enable Kaname, it will put you back on the damage race. So if you play it or trigger it on level 0, you want to basically prepare your setup, so the Kaname or the Brainstorm. If you trigger it on level 1, you want to be summoning the 2-1 Reina. This adds a little power to the Mikomo, and this saves you 1 stock. And if you trigger it on level 2, you want to put one of your finisher, preferably Freya and Ayate, because in the case that you're still in level 2, you can actually attack with it on the next turn, and use the heal 1 draw 1 effect to snowball even more. And if when you play it, you don't have any of these cards, you can just play a Chiri or a Kome, one of these on-death effects, over one of your slots. It's easy and fixed, it's cool, it's free. And note that one thing you can do also is to actually play the standby on the Freya combo, and use Mocha free, and only attack for 2 soul. Because usually what happens with this kind of Mocha effect is that you check 3, you're like, okay, I'm going to remove 1 climax, then it's the front for 3, and they end up cancelling anyway. And now with the standby, if it's only for 2, then they do take the 2 damage, you know it's granted. And then your second Mocha can just remove the climax that would be after. So I told you about the game's game plan, but I think it's important to go into what to do in a crisis, what could go wrong, and what you should do at this time, because this is what is going to happen during real games. So number 1 problem, you didn't find Flying Goddess, so you don't have access to the name duplicates, or you have only 1 stock at level 1, because you got rushed. So sometimes you can actually get lucky and draw the Axia, or the Ikinai Borderline combo. So I would suggest to unfix as much as possible to find the characters. The 2-0 Mikumo actually has an early condition for level 1. And then what you can do is like Kaname, summon Kaname, and either you need to reverse the first slot when you summon another Kaname, or you don't need to, and then you can just play one of his on-death effects, the Chiri or the Kome, depending on what you need. The second bad thing that could happen is that you use the Reina Brainstorm effect, you mill your deck, and you only have 3 different names. For this reason, it's pretty important to pay your climaxes, make sure that some names don't get stuck in stock. You also have the Rico to discard them for free. But if it ends up like you just had 3 names that were stuck in bottom 5, maybe you can think about doing a Brainstorm with the Freya, because you'll have likely 2 or 3 climaxes out of 5 cards, so you could still turn it into a positive situation. Third potential problem, you didn't find a climax. It's pretty rare, since you have like so many tools to grab them, but if it happens, I think just take the L. Normally it would mean that you milled a lot, so you probably have a triple cancel coming up. And problem number 4 is that you skipped a level, so skipping level 0 is pretty grave. You might just have to take another turn to make stock and set up your hand. Level 1 and level 2 game plans are the same, but if you're skipping level 2, you probably didn't prepare your finishers, so you'll need to invest a bit more stock to fix your hand. So the upside of this deck is that it's pretty unique, it really doesn't play like anything else, it manages to make playing 6 different climaxes viable. It has very low RNG, or luck, since you are pretty much never taking the refresh damage, so never taking the risk of losing a climax to the refresh damage. And you have a very high selectivity, because you can choose between all your waiting room for 2 cards with Mikumo. And once you have the original setup of 2 events and the Kaname, it's pretty easy to play, you just rinse and repeat. And lastly, it's a bit more rare, but you don't really get countered by niche, anti-burn or anti-heal or anti-salvage, all these defensive effects, because you don't really rely on any of that to win the game, or the timings are always in a way that you don't get affected by it. The downside is that you are sensitive to early rush. If you don't have enough stock at level 1, or if you're at 1-0, You cannot develop your setup because the event is red and Kaname is yellow, so it's a bit more complicated than standard rush deck that can just play out their combo. If somehow at level 1 your opponent can block the Mikumo, have enough power, you'll have a really hard time, because your endsides will be destroyed. And lastly, the lethal rage is not that high, with just Mocha, you're going to struggle a bit to kill an opponent from level 2. So you really want to be ahead in terms of damage during the mid game. Not clock, not take any refresh, and keep on rushing. So I hope that you enjoyed this guide, and that it helps you understand how to play this deck. Remember to like and subscribe, it really helps out the channel. Tell me which kind of deck you'd like to see a guide for in the comments. I'll probably do it on the Weiss Schwarz simulator for decks I don't own. And thank you for watching, bye bye!